Let me explain. When someone questions your intentions, misinterprets your words, or spreads their version of your story, the natural impulse is to correct them, to clarify, to defend. But here's the truth. The moment you step into the ring to defend yourself, you've already handed them the pen to write your narrative. You've given them control. Defensiveness isn't strength, it's fear in disguise. It's the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being rejected, or the fear of being judged wrongly. But truth needs no defense. Truth holds. It endures. It doesn't flinch under pressure. People will say what they want, twist things however it fits their story, and if your peace is dependent on changing their mind, then your peace was never real to begin with. It was conditional. You are not responsible for someone else's version of you. You're only responsible for showing up in alignment with your values. Over time, consistency exposes truth louder than any argument ever could. When you defend yourself, you force connection, you force understanding. But real connection comes from being grounded, not grappling, from being still, not striving. There's power in pausing when you're triggered. There's clarity in the calm. There's strength in looking at someone who misunderstands you and simply saying, I hear you. Not because you agree, not because you're weak, but because you refuse to waste energy explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. Let your actions speak. Let your peace speak. Let your energy speak. The people who matter, they'll see it. The ones who don't, they never truly listened in the first place. Understand this. Every time you explain your worth, you lower it in the eyes of someone who already chose not to see it. You don't have to show up to every argument you're invited to. Protect your energy. You don't need to be louder. You just need to be clear with yourself. So the next time someone tries to pull you into the trap of defending your character, pause, breathe, and remind yourself, I know who I am. I don't need to convince you. You are not here to perform for approval. You are not here to adjust for acceptance. And you are certainly not here to beg anyone to believe you. You are here to stand, centered in your truth, unbothered, undistracted, unshaken. Because when you stop defending yourself, you start reclaiming yourself. Like you. Defensiveness is one of those automatic habits that feels like self-protection, but often works against us. It's that knee-jerk reaction that says, let me prove myself, let me explain, or let me correct you. But behind that reaction is not clarity. It's not grounded confidence. It's the ego bruised, fearful, and anxious to be seen as right. We live in a world where being misunderstood feels dangerous. We've been conditioned to believe that if someone thinks badly of us, it must be corrected immediately. But here's the thing, defensiveness doesn't correct anything. It escalates. It adds fuel to the fire. It invites tension into conversations that could have been opportunities for calm reflection. When you defend yourself in the heat of the moment, you're usually not speaking from a place of truth. You're speaking from a place of fear. You're trying to preserve your image, not your peace. And truth, real truth, doesn't need panic. It doesn't need a platform. It doesn't need permission. It simply is. Truth is quiet. Ego is loud. Think about it. How often do you leave an argument where you were defensive and feel good about it afterward? Rarely, because the reaction might satisfy your pride for a moment, but it rarely serves your peace in the long run. Being defensive is not the same as standing up for yourself. Defending is reacting. Standing up for yourself is responding. One is impulsive, the other is intentional. One is rooted in anxiety, the other is rooted in self-assurance. So how do you shift from reacting to responding? That pause, that breath, that moment of silence is your power. It's where your truth lives. It's the space where you remind yourself, I don't need to rush to be understood. I just need to remain aligned with who I am. When someone accuses you, criticizes you, or misrepresents you, and you immediately jump to defend, ask yourself, am I trying to be right, or am I trying to be at peace? Because the two often don't coexist. The desire to be right stems from ego. The desire to be at peace stems from truth. Defensiveness also puts the focus on them, their version of the story, their opinion, their judgment. But truth puts the focus back on you, on your values, your integrity, your consistency. And here's what's really important. Not everyone deserves access to your explanation. Some people question you not because they want clarity, but because they want control. They want to rattle your sense of self. When you rush to defend, you validate their role in your peace. You let them decide your value. But you are allowed to step back. You are allowed to say nothing. You are allowed to let your actions speak. You don't have to prove yourself to people who never truly saw you in the first place. So next time you feel that urge to defend, stop. Breathe. Look within. Ask yourself, is this ego or is this truth? There's something incredibly disarming about silence. In a world that constantly urges you to explain, justify, and clarify yourself, choosing not to speak, especially in moments of tension, can feel almost rebellious. But it's not weakness. It's wisdom. When someone accuses you, disrespects you, or tries to pull you into a verbal tug-of-war, your first instinct might be to jump in and clear your name. You want to fix it, make it right, or prove your side. But explanations are often wasted on people who have already made up their minds. Worse, in some situations, your attempt to explain can actually make you look guilty, anxious, or unsure. Not because you are, but because you're engaging on their terms. Silence disrupts that dynamic. It pauses the momentum of the conflict. It creates space. It forces the other person to sit with their own words, their own assumptions. It removes the fuel from the fire. Silence isn't passive, it's not avoidance, it's a choice, a firm, grounded response that says, I do not need to validate myself to you. And in that pause, your presence, steady, unshaken, communicates far more than a dozen well-worded explanations ever could. When you remain calm, when you don't flinch under pressure, it shows that you are anchored in something deeper than approval. It shows you know who you are. And people pay attention to that. Even those who may not agree with you will notice your peace. There is strength in restraint. Anyone can argue, anyone can fire back, but to stand in silence, not with bitterness, not with sarcasm, but with composure, that takes real discipline. It doesn't mean you're letting people walk over you. It means you're wise enough to know that not every accusation deserves your energy. Some people thrive off your reaction. They want the drama. They want to watch you lose your center. But when you meet their chaos with stillness, you break the pattern. And here's what happens next. Silence exposes. It reveals the other person's intent. If they were truly looking for resolution, they'll fill the stillness and adjust. If they were looking for control, they'll grow uncomfortable. Either way, silence tells you everything you need to know about the person you're dealing with. Sometimes silence is a mirror, and people don't like what they see in it. That's not your burden to carry. Your responsibility is to protect your peace, not to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. You are not obligated to explain your soul to everyone who demands access to it. You don't owe your truth to those who never asked for it with respect. And you certainly don't have to dilute your calm just to match someone else's storm. Let your silence speak for you. Let your energy, your consistency, your calm presence be your answer. Because in the face of accusation, there is nothing more powerful than the quiet confidence of someone who knows their worth and doesn't need to prove it. And in that stillness, you'll find something rare, real peace. The kind of peace that speaks volumes without saying a word. There's a quiet kind of power that comes from living in alignment with your values. It doesn't beg to be noticed. It doesn't chase validation. It simply is. It exists in how you carry yourself, how you treat others when no one's watching, how you keep your word even when it's inconvenient, and how you show up with respect even when disrespected. Your character is your silent megaphone. It speaks long after you've left the room. And when it's consistent, when who you are aligns with what you say, you won't need to talk people into believing in you. Your life, your energy, your reputation will speak louder than any defense you could ever offer. The truth is, people remember patterns. They remember how you show up over time, not what you say in one emotional moment. You can't talk someone into trusting you if your actions contradict your words. But if your integrity is steady, there comes a point when you no longer have to say anything because your consistency has already said it all. In a world obsessed with image, character is the one thing that doesn't need to be broadcast. You don't need to post about loyalty if you live it. You don't need to declare your honesty if it's embedded in your actions. You don't need to correct every misinterpretation if your life keeps proving who you are. People will talk, they'll assume, they'll form their own narratives. Let them. It's not your job to run around cleaning up false perceptions. That's not character, that's performance. And you weren't born to perform. You were born to live truthfully. Every time you act with integrity, even when it's hard, even when no one applauds, you are building a legacy that no lie can dismantle. That's what true character is. Not perfection, but alignment. Not noise, but presence. It's easy to speak well of yourself. It's harder and more meaningful to live in a way that others speak well of you without being asked. You don't have to be loud to be strong. You don't have to explain yourself to be clear. You don't have to fight to be seen when you're rooted in who you are. When your values guide your decisions, when your principles shape your path, you start attracting the right people. People who notice what you do, not just what you say. People who feel safe around your steadiness. People who trust your presence because it's not built on performance, but on truth. So the next time someone questions your intentions, resist the urge to defend. Just keep being who you are. Let them wonder. Let your history speak. Let your consistency echo. Because the loudest proof of who you are is not found in what you argue, it's found in how you live. Live so rooted in your values that you don't need to convince a soul. Your character quietly, confidently will do all the speaking for you. There's a subtle but heavy cost that comes with constantly defending yourself, and it's your personal power. Every time you scramble to fix someone's opinion of you, you're giving them the steering wheel to your peace. You hand over your emotional stability, your self-worth, and your confidence in exchange for something fleeting, their approval. But here's the hard truth. No matter how carefully you explain, no matter how clearly you articulate, you can't force someone to see you accurately. if they're committed to misunderstanding you. And when you make their perception your priority, you start losing sight of who you are. Defending yourself often feels like you're doing the right thing. After all, shouldn't we stand up for ourselves? Absolutely. But there's a difference between standing in your truth and chasing someone else's validation. One is grounded and calm. The other is reactive and exhausting. When you try to explain yourself to someone who's already made up their mind, you're not communicating, you're performing. You're trying to win back control over how you're seen. But here's the problem. If your sense of peace is dependent on how others view you, then your peace was never really yours to begin with. Real power is internal. It's knowing who you are and not needing every voice in the room to agree. It's choosing not to show up to every debate you're invited to. It's understanding that your truth doesn't become less valid just because someone else refuses to recognize it. The moment you stop trying to be understood, you start reclaiming your energy. You begin to operate from a place of self-trust. You start recognizing that someone else's version of you is not your responsibility to manage. People are going to see you through the lens of their own pain, insecurity, jealousy, or misunderstanding. And that's okay, let them. When you defend yourself out of fear of being misjudged, rejected, or disliked, you shrink your power. You start contorting yourself for comfort you'll never receive. But when you release the urge to explain, you expand. You take back control. You move from reactive to intentional. There is quiet strength in saying nothing and allowing people to believe what they want and letting your actions, your consistency, and your energy speak for you. Because those who truly see you won't need a presentation, and those who don't, they won't hear you anyway. Sometimes silence is not weakness, it's self-respect. It says, I know who I am, and I won't argue with someone who's not even listening. Power isn't found in being louder, clearer, or more convincing. It's found in being so deeply anchored in your truth that you no longer need to defend it. So stop chasing their understanding, reclaim your power, walk in peace. Let go of the need to be right in their eyes and focus instead on being aligned in your own. Because when you stop defending yourself, you start protecting yourself. And that is where real strength begins. There's something powerful about not needing to be understood right away. In a world full of noise, debates, opinions, and endless back and forths, the instinct to explain ourselves, to make people get it, can be overwhelming. But often, the harder you push to be understood, the more resistance you create. Because people rarely listen when they feel pressured. When your words come from a place of desperation to be accepted, they're often met with defensiveness. They don't hear your heart, they hear your need. And neediness, even when unintentional, can cloud the message. Sometimes clarity doesn't come through more words, it comes through less force. The more calmly you hold your truth without trying to shove it into someone else's mind, the more likely they are to actually hear it. Not immediately, but in time. True communication isn't about convincing someone in the moment. It's about planting seeds. It's about showing up with calm, with consistency, with quiet clarity, even when others don't respond the way you hoped. Because maturity means understanding that you're not always going to be received the way you intended. And that's okay. Let people sit with what you've said. Let them walk away thinking they didn't hear you. Because one day something will click. Your words will come back to them. Not because you forced it, but because you gave them space. There's a beautiful paradox in communication. The less you try to be understood, the more people begin to understand you. Not because you said it louder, but because you didn't wrap it in pressure. When you're calm, when you stop defending, people lean in. Your peace makes them curious. Your stillness makes them reflect. It's not about staying silent. It's about releasing the need to persuade. Speak your truth once, clearly and without tension. Then step back, because people remember how you made them feel more than what you said, and calm presence is unforgettable. When you argue, you step into their emotional space. You meet them where they are, reactive, anxious, defensive. But when you respond with clarity and let go of the outcome, you remain centered. That's when your message becomes magnetic. And here's the thing. If someone is truly open, they'll hear you. Maybe not today, but eventually. And if they're not, no amount of explaining will reach them. So why exhaust yourself? Why tie your peace to someone else's readiness? Speak, be honest, be kind, and then let go. Because the truth doesn't need to be shouted, it only needs to be lived. And often the loudest message is your silence after a clear statement. When you stop trying so hard to be understood, you create the space for people to come to understanding on their own. There's a kind of peace that comes when you stop looking outward for what should have always come from within. Validation, that deep sense of being seen, accepted, and approved, is something many of us spend our lives chasing from others. From parents, partners, bosses, friends, strangers on the internet, we're constantly asking, do you like me? Do you agree with me? Am I enough for you? But here's the uncomfortable truth. The more you depend on others for validation, the more disconnected you become from yourself. When you're authentic, truly authentic, not everyone is going to clap for you. Not everyone is going to understand you. Some people will be uncomfortable with your truth because it challenges their illusion. Others will project their insecurities onto your freedom, and many will simply not get it. And that's okay. That doesn't mean you need to shrink. It means you need to stand firmer. You owe no one an explanation for being real, not for choosing peace over people-pleasing, not for growing in a direction they didn't expect, not for loving yourself enough to set boundaries, not for refusing to play a role just to make others feel comfortable. Authenticity isn't about being loud or rebellious. It's about being aligned. It's about knowing who you are when no one's looking and choosing to honor that version of yourself even when the world has questions. You don't need everyone to agree with your choices. You don't need every hand raised in approval. You need your own yes. That quiet internal, I'm proud of how I showed up today. That's what builds real confidence. That's what builds a life of integrity. External validation is inconsistent. It shifts with mood, popularity, and perception. But internal validation, that's yours. That's steady. That's where your power lives. The moment you stop performing for applause, you start living from truth. The moment you stop explaining yourself to people who haven't earned access to your soul, you reclaim your time, your energy, and your peace. People will have opinions. Let them. They'll talk, question, whisper. Let them. Their voices don't define your value unless you give them that power. And you don't have to. Start checking in with yourself more than you check your reflection in someone else's eyes. Ask yourself, did I show up honestly? Did I stay aligned with what I believe in? Did I act from truth, not fear? If the answer is yes, then that's your validation. That's your green light. That's your peace. You are not here to earn your existence. You are not here to be palatable to every person you meet. You are here to be you, fully, unapologetically, and without explanation. So the next time you feel the urge to explain, to justify, to make someone else comfortable with your truth, pause, take a breath, remind yourself, I don't need permission to be real. Because the deepest validation you'll ever receive won't come from them. It'll come from within you. And that kind of validation, no one can take it away. When you stop defending yourself, you start discovering yourself. You step out of the exhausting cycle of seeking approval, explaining your truth, and reacting to every misunderstanding, and instead you step into stillness, strength, and clarity. You realize that not every comment deserves your energy. Not every accusation needs a response, and not every opinion should shape your peace. Defensiveness is rooted in fear, fear of being misjudged, unloved, or unseen. But when you learn to pause, to stand in your truth without the need to be validated, you reclaim your power. You let your character do the talking. You let your silence speak volumes. You trust that the people meant to understand you will, and those who don't, never needed to. In a world obsessed with noise, performance, and perfection, choosing to be quietly authentic is the ultimate strength. You don't have to fight to be seen when you see yourself clearly. You don't need to beg for respect when you live with integrity. And you certainly don't need to defend who you are when you're at peace with it. To walk with calm, speak with intention, let your presence say what words never could. Because the less you chase to be understood, the more your truth finds its way naturally, powerfully, and in perfect timing. Thank you.